Imagine boarding a routine flight only to witness a scene so shocking it silences an entire cabin. A seasoned flight attendant, under pressure from personal turmoil and a demanding passenger, loses control. Her hand strikes a composed black teenager seated alone. The slap echoes like thunder, but that is only the beginning. Who is this girl who refuses to cry? Why does every camera phone rise in unison to capture her pain? What secrets lie behind her calm gaze as the world watches? We learn she is not just any passenger. She is the adopted daughter of one of Hollywood's most powerful figures. In the next 12 chapters, we travel from turbulent sky to boardroom reckoning. We explore wounds of discrimination, the power of accountability, and the redemptive journey from shame to transformation. Will one moment define their lives forever, or can compassion and dialogue pave a new path forward? If you crave a story of justice, empathy, and unexpected alliances, hit like, share this video, and subscribe now. Let us begin this emotional journey together. The sound was unmistakable. A sharp, human smack. Skin on skin. The kind of sound that slices through white noise, through humming engines, rustling snack wrappers, and idle mid-air conversation. For a split second, time paused. Every passenger in cabin A of Flight 22227 stopped breathing. The flight attendant's hand hovered in the air, as if even she couldn't quite believe it had moved. Zuri Callahan's head remained turned to the side, her left cheek reddening fast. Her fingers trembled slightly over the spot. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Not in front of these people. Not even now. 3 rows back. A phone camera was already up. Then another. Then 2 more. A middle-aged man muttered, "Jesus," under his breath. The woman beside him looked like she was about to throw up. The silence was so deep you could hear a child's toy clinking faintly from economy. The plane was mid-turbulence, but this was something else. This was a different kind of shake. Emotional, not physical. No one moved, no one spoke, except Brent Holloway. Seated directly behind Zuri, the sharply dressed businessman with the expensive watch and thinner patience leaned forward, phone raised like a weapon. "Got it," he said, grinning like he'd just won a game. "She just assaulted a minor, a black girl, on camera. This is going viral before we even touch down." The flight attendant, Dana McKinley, still hadn't moved. Her mouth was open slightly. Her wedding ring caught the harsh cabin lighting, flashing like an accusation. Her face looked pale, shocked. She was staring at her own hand, like it didn't belong to her anymore. From the jump seat, Carmen Rivas had leapt up the moment she heard the slap. Now she was moving quickly toward them, her voice calm but urgent. "Dana, I need you to step back." Dana blinked, a beat, then another. Finally, she took one shaky step backward, almost bumping into the beverage cart. Zuri turned her head slowly. Her eyes met Dana's. There was no screaming, no theatrics, just something infinitely heavier, disappointment, and something worse, hurt, wrapped in betrayal. Zuri spoke softly, a single line, measured, controlled, "You don't get to touch me." Dana tried to speak, but the words got caught in her throat. Captain Nolan Reed's voice broke in over the speaker, steady as always, but a touch too clipped. "Flight attendants, please report any disturbances immediately. We are beginning final descent into Chicago Midway. Prepare the cabin." Carmen took Zuri gently by the elbow. "Come with me," she said. Zuri didn't argue, didn't cry. She let Carmen guide her to the rear jump seat area. Ms. B. Underwood, the elderly woman in first class who had taken a liking to Zuri during boarding, sat stunned in seat 2C. Her eyes followed the girl down the aisle with the professor's sharpened instinct watching, absorbing, remembering. Brent Holloway didn't bother to hide his satisfaction. His phone was still recording. Dana stood frozen, her entire career flashing before her eyes. 23 years in the air, 5,000 flights, 0 incidents, until now. The plane jolted gently as it started descent. No one clapped, no one smiled. What, no one on board knew not Brent, not the passengers glued to their phones. Not even Dana was that Zuri Callahan wasn't just another teenager on a flight from New York to Chicago. She was the adopted daughter of Caleb Callahan, Hollywood producer, former action star, social justice advocate, a man whose face still graced red carpets, whose voice could shift national conversations. And in less than 30 minutes, he would see a video of his daughter being struck by a flight attendant. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. But to understand how they got here, how two strangers collided in a sky full of strangers and mistakes, how an entire flight was thrust into a debate bigger than any of them could imagine. We have to go back to before the slap, before the camera phones, before the hashtags, 48 hours earlier. Dana McKinley stood barefoot in her bathroom, staring into the mirror. The early morning light leaked through cheap blinds, washing her face in uneven gray. She blinked, and her reflection blinked back, tired and unfiltered. The wrinkles around her mouth looked deeper today, or maybe the lighting just sucked. The bathroom light flickered again. That damn bulb had needed changing for a month. She sighed. From the other room, the tiny kitchen TV played some morning news, something about interest rates, or protests. She barely listened anymore. Dana picked up her mascara, applied it slowly, like armor. She didn't know it yet, but the next 48 hours would unravel everything. The alarm buzzed at 4:48 a.m. Dana McKinley didn't jump up. She never did. These days, she let the sound buzz until her bones caught up with her brain. The room was cold. Her ankle cracked as she rolled out of bed. The mattress had a dip in the middle, the kind that whispered memories she didn't ask for. Outside her apartment window, Queens was still sleeping. A distant ambulance wailed past on Roosevelt Avenue. Somewhere above, a plane traced a path through a pale dawn sky. Dana followed its motion for a moment, watching until it disappeared into cloud. She reached for her phone. 3 texts from Carmen. 3:16 a.m. Girl, I swear if Brent Holloway is on today's flight, I'm faking food poisoning 3:42 a.m. Also, we better not be on one of the broken carts again. 1:01 a.m. You bringing muffins or nah? Dana smiled without showing her teeth. Carmen always knew how to break through her fog. That was one of her few constants now. Most other things had fallen away. Her marriage, her weekends, her mother's health. Time had stolen quietly, while she stayed in the sky. She walked into the tiny kitchen, careful not to trip over the loose tile by the fridge. The coffee pot gurgled on a timer. Her cat, Pepper, weaved around her ankles like a little guardian angel with fur. Dana poured 1 mug for now, 1 into her thermos. The walls of her apartment were mostly bare. A few framed photos remained. Her graduation from flight school, a grainy photo from 2001, her first flight uniform crisp and oversized. Her eyes had sparkled then. Now, they looked like someone else's. She stared at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Still her, but different. Older, not in a defeated way, just heavier. Her shoulders carried things now, deadlines, regrets, 5 extra pounds, memories of passengers who screamed, children who cried, a pilot who once held her hand during turbulence because she looked like she needed it more than he did. Dana got dressed with methodical precision. Navy skirt, white blouse, blue scarf tied at the neck, gold pin, name tag. She looked at herself one more time before leaving. Then she closed the door, locking it behind her like a chapter she wasn't ready to reread. At JFK. Gate 42B was already buzzing with soft chaos. Parents corralling toddlers, a man yelling into his Bluetooth about a shipment delay, a college student balancing a matcha latte and an oversized keyboard. Just another Tuesday. Dana met Carmen at the gate. Carmen wore sunglasses even inside. Her bun was tight. Her lipstick was a shade of confidence Dana hadn't felt in months. "Did you bring the muffins?" Carmen asked. "I forgot." "Again?" Dana replied. Carmen shook her head. "Ma'am, that's strike 3. You're on thin ice." They smiled, the kind of smile that said we've survived worse together. Captain Nolan Reed approached with a clipboard and calm energy, salt and pepper hair, strong posture, eyes that had seen war zones and weddings from 30,000 feet. "Morning, ladies," he said. "Weather's clear, tailwind out of JFK. Should be a smooth ride unless Chicago throws a fit." Dana nodded. Chicago always throws a fit. The three of them chuckled. Routine was comfort, and comfort was rare. Flight 2227 was fully booked, business travelers up front, families in the back, a few students, one unaccompanied minor flagged on the manifest, seat 3A. Dana made a mental note. The crew finished briefing, then moved to boarding. Dana stood at the front, smiling politely at passengers. Most didn't smile back. That was fine. She was used to it. Carmen handled the aisle. Dana stayed near the galley, helping with oversized bags, greeting elderly passengers, answering last-minute questions about seat assignments. Then she saw a girl, 16, maybe 17, brown skin, long, natural curls pulled into a neat bun, clean denim jacket, gray leggings, worn sneakers, a black canvas tote with Toni Morrison quotes scribbled in ink, Zuri Callahan. She handed over her ticket and ID without a word. Her face was composed, but her eyes darted around, observant, watchful. Dana had seen that look before. Kids who traveled often without parents, the kind who learned early that safety doesn't always wear a name tag. "Hi there," Dana said gently. "You're in 3A, just to the left. Let us know if you need anything." Zuri nodded. "Thanks." She walked past, and something about her posture stayed with Dana. She didn't slouch like most teenagers. She moved with quiet precision, like someone who'd grown up learning to walk through crowded rooms without being noticed. Ms. B. Underwood boarded shortly after. Silver hair in a perfect twist, bright scarf, carrying a tattered hardback copy of The Bluest Eye. Zuri noticed. "That's a great book," she said softly. B. turned, pleased. "I don't meet many young people who recognize it. I've read it 3 times, Zuri said. "Toni Morrison makes you feel seen, even when you're invisible." B. smiled, visibly impressed. "You're special, young lady. Don't let anyone treat you otherwise." From 2 rows behind, Brent Holloway grunted. "Everyone's special these days," he muttered. Then louder, "Any chance I can swap to the aisle seat in 1A? Dana stepped in. "I'm sorry, sir. That seat's reserved. You're in 3C. Brent rolled his eyes. "Of course. God forbid a paying customer get some flexibility." Dana didn't reply. She'd learned long ago which battles were worth fighting. As boarding completed and the doors closed, Dana moved down the cabin, checking for seat belts and upright trays. Zuri had already buckled herself. She was writing something in a notebook with a pink pen. "Do you fly often?" Dana asked, more out of curiosity than protocol. Zuri looked up. "Only when I'm visiting my grandma. She's in Chicago." Dana nodded. "That's nice. Not many teenagers travel alone these days." "I've had to grow up faster than most," Zuri replied, matter-of-factly. Dana wanted to ask more, but the cabin lights dimmed for takeoff. The engines roared to life. Flight 2227 lifted into the sky, just another silver bird chasing morning. But this flight would not be ordinary. It would not be quiet. And no one, least of all Dana McKinley, was ready for what the skies held. Zuri Callahan hated packing, not because she had too many clothes or because she forgot things. Zuri was methodical, precise. What bothered her was the emotion of it. The act of placing items into a suitcase made everything feel too final, too structured, like putting your life into a box and pretending you had control. She folded her favorite gray hoodie with care. It still smelled faintly like her grandmother's garden in Bronzeville. Lilac, mint, faint whiffs of clove. That garden was the reason she was flying back to Chicago. Grandma Loretta's knees were acting up again, and she'd missed Zuri's birthday. Caleb had offered to come too, but Zuri insisted on going alone. "She misses me," she told him. "Besides, you've got meetings." Caleb Callahan had looked at her across the kitchen island, brow furrowed, always trying not to be too protective. But Zuri had that effect on people. She didn't ask for permission. She made decisions with quiet clarity, the kind you couldn't argue with. "I'll be on set in the morning," Caleb said, "but I'll have my phone. You text me when you land. Then again when you're with Grandma. No shortcuts." "I know," Zuri said. "You give the same speech every time, and you roll your eyes the same way every time." She smirked. He grinned back. Caleb Callahan wasn't like other Hollywood types. He had the kind of grounded energy that made producers and politicians take note. Once the lead in action movies, now a respected director and social equity advocate. But at home, he was dad, corny, protective, a master of turkey sandwiches, and fiercely in love with the daughter he had adopted when she was just 6 years old. He never let the world forget who she was. And yet, Zuri still found herself reminding the world who she was not. On the way to the airport, their driver made polite conversation about the weather. Zuri stared out the window, watching the rain streak the glass in the slow motion. She thought about the book she brought, beloved, and the way Morrison wrapped horror in poetry. Thought about Loretta's chessboard in the living room and how she always opened with the Queen's Gambit. Thought about the feeling of being 16 and both too old and too young to explain yourself. The airport was its usual chaos, TSA lines, announcements no one listened to, someone's toddler screaming like a siren. Zuri moved through it all with practiced ease. She had learned early how to shrink herself just enough to avoid drawing attention, but never enough to vanish. At gate 42B, she found a seat near a window, not too close to the other passengers. She didn't have earbuds in, but she pretended she did. It kept strangers from asking questions. That's when she noticed the woman reading Morrison. Not just any Morrison. the bluest eye. The cover was cracked, corners folded, the pages had been loved. Zuri stared for a beat too long. "Great book," she said before she could stop herself. The woman looked up. She had kind eyes, the kind that had weathered things but refused to become cruel. "Not many young people recognize it," she said. "I've read it 3 times. "Then you've read it more than some of my college students," the woman replied, smiling. "Name's B. Underwood. Zuri," she said. "Zuri Callahan." B nodded, folding her book. "You've got the kind of name that sticks, strong and lyrical. Your parents have good taste." Zuri offered a small smile. "Just my dad." B didn't push, just gave a knowing nod. They talked for a while about literature, about how certain books held up a mirror and didn't flinch, about school systems and banned reading lists, about how being black and female meant you were expected to be strong even when you were breaking. Then the boarding announcement came, and just like that, the moment dissolved into movement. The line shuffled forward. Zuri found her place among the boarding group. She watched B head toward the priority line. A small wave exchanged between them. Once aboard, Zuri slid into seat 3A, a window seat. She liked watching the ground fall away. Something about seeing the world from above made everything feel smaller, more manageable. Like maybe there was a version of life where people stopped assuming they knew who you were from 5 feet away. She reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook, wrote a line she'd heard in a dream. "Sometimes the safest place is the sky, because the earth never learned how to hold us." She was still writing when she heard a man in the aisle behind her grumbling, "This seat better recline. I swear, if I have to deal with another brat kicking the back of my chair." Zuri didn't turn around, but she didn't need to. The tone said enough. She kept writing. A moment later, a voice interrupted her focus. "Hi there. You're Zuri." "Right. I'm Dana, one of your flight attendants today." Zuri looked up. The woman was tall, with neatly combed light brown hair and tired eyes that still tried to smile. Her voice was polite, but practiced, like she had said this 100 times. "Yes, I'm in 3A, Zuri said. Dana nodded. "That's right. We'll be taking off soon. Just let us know if you need anything. Your grandma's waiting in Chicago." "Right?" Zuri blinked. "Yeah. How'd you know it was in the unaccompanied minor note on your file?" Dana replied. "Don't worry. We get a lot of smart, independent teens flying solo." Zuri smiled politely. "I've done this before. I can tell." Dana moved on. Zuri went back to her notebook. She wrote another line. "The sky never asks who you are. It just lifts you." Across the aisle, Brent Holloway settled into 3C with exaggerated sighs and complaints about leg room. Zuri caught the words private jet and first class in his phone conversation. She rolled her eyes and leaned against the window, letting the cabin sounds blur around her. As the engines roared and the plane began to lift, Zuri closed her eyes. She thought of Grandma Loretta waiting with sweet tea and chessboard. She thought of the woman in 2C with the Morrison novel. She thought of the man behind her who already hated her without knowing her name. And she thought of how, sometimes, even the sky could not protect you from what was waiting inside the clouds. Dana McKinley stood near the galley, watching passengers file past with the calm of someone who had done this more times than she could count. The beverage cart beside her smelled faintly of plastic and ginger ale. She kept her expression neutral and polite, a calm face in the middle of airport chaos. Carmen Rivas leaned in from behind, whispering low enough that only Dana could hear. He's on board. Row 3, Mr. Holloway, our favorite." Dana's eyes moved quickly toward 3C. Brent Holloway had already taken his seat. His briefcase was wedged under the seat in front of him, and he was talking too loudly on his phone. "Of course he is," Dana murmured. "I must have summoned him by forgetting the muffins." Carmen chuckled softly. "You really need to work on what you manifest." The cabin doors sealed shut. The subtle change in air pressure signaled they were airborne soon. Dana moved through the aisle, completing her pre-takeoff checks. She was quick and efficient, her hands and eyes in sync, seatbelts fastened, trays upright, phones stowed. It was all second nature by now. When she reached 3A, she paused. Zuri Callahan sat still, her notebook open across her lap. She wasn't writing. She was staring quietly out the window, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Dana nodded gently at her. Zuri didn't return the look. Her attention was elsewhere. Across the aisle, Brent muttered something into his phone about teenagers and headphones. Dana kept walking. She didn't need this today. Not the extra complaints, not the snide passengers. She already had too much waiting back home. Her mother's nurse had canceled again. Her bank was calling about the overdraft. Her knee still ached from standing too long on her last double shift. All small things. But small things build up. The captain's voice came on through the speaker system. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 2227. We're headed to Chicago this morning. Flight time is just over 2 hours. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened during taxi and takeoff." Dana buckled herself into the jump seat at the front of the cabin. She leaned back and closed her eyes for just a second. Her hands rested on her lap, clasped loosely together. "Let this be a smooth one," she thought. "Let me get through one day without something going wrong." Zuri felt the wheels lift from the runway. That brief moment when gravity gives up and air takes over was always her favorite part. She pressed her forehead against the window and watched the ground fall away. From this height, the world looked less dangerous, like maybe the clouds were soft enough to catch her if she ever fell. Behind her, Brent Holloway was still talking. He had ended the call, but his commentary continued. Loud, passive-aggressive, impossible to ignore. Zuri clenched her fingers around her pen and tried not to let his voice get under her skin. She turned the page of her notebook, wrote a few words. A line came to her. "Even the sky doesn't judge you by your skin." She wasn't sure if it was poetry or a thought, but she liked how it sounded. The flight attendants began their first pass with the beverage cart. Dana was in front, Carmen behind her. They moved together like they had done this 1,000 times. When Dana reached 3A, she looked at Zuri with that same professional politeness. "Hi there. Would you like something to drink Diet Coke? No ice, please." Dana turned and reached for the can. As she began to pour it into the plastic cup, the plane gave a small shudder, not a full jolt, but enough to tip the cart. The drink spilled across Zuri's lap. Zuri flinched. The cold soda soaked through her jeans in seconds. Dana's eyes widened. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly. "Let me get some napkins." "It's okay," Zuri said. Her voice was calm but clipped. Dana handed her several napkins. Zuri took them and began blotting her pants. "I'll grab a towel from the galley. Please stay seated until the seatbelt sign is off," Dana added. "I'd rather stand for a second," Zuri said. She moved her hand toward the buckle. "Please stay seated," Dana said again, her tone sharper this time. Zuri looked up. Brent chuckled behind her. Maybe next time listen the first time, he muttered. Zuri turned slightly in her seat. Excuse me. Brent leaned forward. His voice was louder now. I said, maybe if you followed instructions, we wouldn't all be delayed. Dana stepped in quickly. Let's all stay calm, she said, raising her hand slightly. I didn't do anything wrong, Zuri replied, her voice tight now. I'm just trying to keep things safe, Dana said. You spilled the drink on me. I just wanted to stand. Zuri said. She held the soaked napkins up slightly. Like evidence, I said I'm sorry, Dana replied. Her voice was louder than before, too loud. Passengers nearby began to look up. Carmen was walking toward them from the rear of the cabin. I'll finish this row, she said softly, placing a hand on the cart. Dana nodded and stepped away, walking back to the galley. Her breath was shallow. Her temples pulsed. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes for a moment. She hated how quickly things escalated. It wasn't just the soda. It was everything, all of it. The way passengers talked to her like she was invisible. The way management dismissed her complaints. The way people filmed you instead of helping. She had seen careers end over less, and she didn't know if she had it in her to rebuild again. Zuri stared down at her notebook. Her pen was still resting in her fingers, but she hadn't written anything since the spill. She felt the wet chill of her jeans, the sting of being accused without cause. Not by Dana exactly, but by the tone, by the assumption that her actions were a threat, that her standing up was a problem. She thought about responding, about standing again. But then she thought of her father's voice in her head. Breathe. Think first. Words last longer than anger. So she sat, silent, her fingers tense, her shoulders pulled tight. She looked out the window, but the clouds no longer looked gentle. They looked sharp, cold. Passengers nearby whispered, and somewhere inside her, Zuri knew. This wasn't over, not yet. The seatbelt sign was still on, but most of the turbulence had eased. A soft hum filled the cabin. Somewhere behind her, Zuri could hear the clink of ice cubes and plastic cups, the rustle of someone opening a granola bar, the soft flutter of pages being turned. But inside her chest, it wasn't calm. She kept feeling the soda against her thighs. It had soaked through her jeans and now clung to her like a reminder, cold and sticky. She could feel her skin tightening under the fabric. She had used the napkins, but they had done little. Her notebook was dry, at least, but her concentration was gone. Across the aisle, Brent Holloway was still talking. Not to anyone in particular now, just loud commentary, as if his opinion was required for the cabin to function. It's not like I spilled the damn drink. Maybe she needs to learn to stay seated when told. Zuri didn't look at him. She pressed her lips together, her knuckles white as she gripped the pen in her hand. He wanted her to react. She could feel it. That's how men like him thrived. On conflict they could spin and win, on pushing girls like her to the edge. So, when they finally said something back, the story became about their tone, not the disrespect that triggered it. She'd seen it happen at school, in stores, in airports. Her father always reminded her. They will bait you to confirm the story they already believe. She took a breath, deep and slow, and turned her head to the window. The sky outside looked clean. Soft gray clouds layered like folds of fabric. She imagined what it would feel like to fall into them and disappear for a while. No noise, no comments, no cold stares or assumptions. Carmen passed by again with the cart. She paused at Zuri's row. "Do you need another towel, sweetheart?" Zuri hesitated. "I'm fine." "Thank you," she said quietly. Carmen gave her a gentle nod before continuing. Zuri wished Carmen had been the one up front during the drink spill. Maybe the moment would have ended there. Maybe it wouldn't have turned into something more. She could still feel Dana's sharp tone in her ears. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Like she was more annoyed than sorry. Like Zuri's discomfort was an inconvenience, not a mistake that deserved care. But that's how it often was. When you're a young black girl in a place where people expect you to be trouble before you even open your mouth, a minor misunderstanding can turn into a spectacle. She had learned to move carefully, speak clearly, control her face, but even that wasn't always enough. She reached into her tote and pulled out a book. She didn't open it. She just held it in her lap, hoping that, maybe, if she looked occupied, people would stop looking at her like she had already done something wrong. Back near the galley, Dana wiped her hands on a paper towel. She had spilled drinks before. It wasn't rare. These things happened. But this one stuck to her skin in a different way. She could still see the girl's expression. Not angry, not dramatic, just disappointed. It was the same look her daughter used to give her before they stopped talking. Dana hadn't meant to snap. She had been trying to stay professional, but her voice had cracked under pressure, and now the energy on board felt like walking through glass. She glanced out at the cabin. Carmen moved smoothly down the aisle, engaging with passengers like she was born for it. Dana admired that about her. Carmen always kept her grace, even when the job got ugly. Dana rubbed her temple. She didn't want to be the villain in this story, but lately it felt like she was always one mistake away from disaster. She was tired of flying, of failing, of trying to be perfect in a system that expected her to smile through disrespect. She pulled her scarf loose, just a bit, to let herself breathe. In row 2, Ms. B. Underwood watched everything unfold from behind her book. She hadn't said a word since takeoff, but she had seen it all. The spill, the tension, the exchange of glances. She had taught high school English for 32 years, and if there was one thing she had learned, it was how to read a room. The girl in 3A reminded her of a former student. Smart, self-possessed, carrying more than her backpack, the kind of girl who knew the rules and still got punished for existing near someone else's discomfort. She thought about saying something, but then she thought about timing. The right words delivered at the wrong time are just noise. She'd wait. She watched Zuri place the book back in her tote. Her hand lingered there. Then it curled into a fist. Zuri finally unbuckled her seatbelt. The sign was still on. She knew it, but the cold in her lap had become unbearable. She needed to change. She needed to breathe. She stood slowly, turned toward the overhead compartment, and reached for her small duffel bag. Her fingers were on the zipper when Dana appeared again. "Please take your seat. We're not cleared for movement yet." Zuri didn't answer at first. "I just need to change," she said. "I understand, but we're still in climb. I need you to stay seated for your safety." "I'm not going to fall over from 10 steps," Zuri said. Her voice edged now. Dana stepped closer. Her eyes flashed with warning. "Zuri, take your seat now." Passengers turned. Brent smirked. "Here we go," he said, loud enough for people to hear. Zuri turned toward him. "Do you ever stop talking?" He raised his hands. Mock innocent. "I'm just saying, rules are rules. Don't make a scene." Zuri's breath caught. She stepped forward slightly. Dana reached out instinctively to block her path. In that exact second, as the plane tilted gently into level altitude, Zuri lost her balance. Her elbow swung back as she turned, and it struck Dana in the ribs. The motion wasn't aggressive. It wasn't even intentional. But Dana's face twisted in surprise. Before anyone could say a word, Dana's hand rose. It came down fast. The slap landed with a sound that froze the entire front half of the cabin. Zuri's cheek turned, her body still, her eyes wide but dry. The silence that followed was heavier than the turbulence, and the moment had changed, forever. For 1 second, everything stood still. Zuri's cheek stung where Dana's palm had struck. Her body stayed rigid, but her eyes turned slowly, not from shock, not from fear, from disbelief. Dana's hand was still in midair, her own face painted with immediate regret. The sound of the slap had cut through the white noise of the cabin. A baby stopped crying. A man in 2B set down his phone. Even the hum of the engine seemed quieter. It wasn't just the act, it was the silence that followed. Zuri blinked once, then twice. Her hands did not rise. She did not scream. She did not cry. Instead, she said 6 words, clear, firm, and devastating. "You do not get to touch me." Brent Holloway's phone was already out, recording. Everyone saw that. Right. That just happened. Behind them, Carmen had turned, eyes wide. She stepped forward fast, placing herself between the two. "Dana, step back, now." Dana took a single step away. Her arms dropped to her sides, her fingers trembling. "I didn't mean to." She moved too fast. "I thought Carmen cut her off. I need you in the galley now." Dana hesitated. She looked around the cabin, saw every set of eyes on her, and turned. Her steps were unsteady as she walked back to the front. Zuri stood motionless. Her breath was shallow. Her heart was thudding, not from fear, but from the weight of holding herself together. She looked around. Faces stared back, some curious, some horrified, some simply stunned. Ms. B. Underwood stood slowly from her seat. She walked the short distance to Zuri and put one gentle hand on her shoulder. "Come sit with me, dear." Zuri nodded once and followed her to seat 2C. She sat down, still holding her notebook. Her knuckles were pale from how tightly she gripped it. Carmen leaned down and looked into her eyes. "I'm so sorry. Zuri, that should never have happened." Zuri gave a small nod, not ready to speak again. Carmen straightened. She glanced at Brent's phone. "Turn that off, please." Brent raised an eyebrow. "Not a chance. This is evidence now. That girl was assaulted." Carmen's jaw clenched. "We're handling this internally until landing. Please respect the process." Brent shrugged. "Whatever you say. Just know the internet's going to handle it too." He kept the phone on his tray table. Camera still rolling. Back in the galley, Dana was staring at the wall. Her back was to the crew phone, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, but the words sounded hollow, even to herself. She had been tired. That was true. She had been stressed, also true. But none of that changed what happened. She had lost control. Her hand had moved before her brain could stop it. It wasn't like her, not even close. In 23 years of flying, she had never touched a passenger like that. Never. And yet, here she was. Her palms still tingled, not from the impact, but from what it meant. She heard Carmen's footsteps before she saw her. Dana. What were you thinking? I don't know. Carmen, I really don't. You hit a passenger, a minor, a black girl. Dana winced at the final words. I panicked. I thought she was swinging at me. She wasn't. You know she wasn't. Everyone saw it. Dana sank onto the metal bench in the crew area. I've worked my whole life to keep it together. I've dealt with screaming passengers, harassment, disgusting jokes. I've smiled through threats. I have never, ever laid a hand on anyone. Carmen looked at her for a long beat. That doesn't change what just happened. Dana nodded slowly. Her voice cracked. I think my career's over. Zuri sat beside Ms. Underwood in silence. The older woman didn't push her to talk. She just sat beside her, breathing in sync, letting the girl have space. Zuri appreciated that more than she could say. After a few minutes, Ms. Underwood finally spoke. What happened to you back there was wrong. So wrong I can barely sit still. But I want you to know something. Zuri looked at her. You held your dignity in front of all of them. You did not shrink. That matters. Zuri's eyes welled up, but she blinked the tears back. I didn't even raise my voice. You didn't have to. Sometimes silence carries more strength than shouting ever could. Zuri looked back toward 3A, her original seat. It felt far away now, like a place from a different day. My dad's gonna see this. Ms. Underwood tilted her head. He should. He'll want to know. What's he like? Protective, smart. He teaches me to think through things. He says the world will make up its mind about me the moment I walk in a room. So, I better know exactly who I am before I do. He sounds like a wise man. He is. The engines hummed. The cabin was quiet again, but not peaceful. Something had shifted, not just between Dana and Zuri, between everyone on board. There was an invisible tension, like a wire stretched across the ceiling. No one spoke too loudly. No one moved too quickly. Zuri opened her notebook again. She wrote one line across the top of the next page. You're not what they see. In the cockpit. Captain Nolan Reed had received the report. Carmen had called it in privately through the crew line. He rubbed his forehead. I thought this route would be quiet. His co-pilot gave him a glance. We still descending into Midway. Yeah, but I'll radio ahead. We may have officials waiting at the gate. He adjusted the controls, eyes flicking toward the monitor. The route ahead looked smooth, but there was nothing smooth about what they'd be stepping into on the ground. Brent Holloway sent the video to 3 contacts, then posted it to a private group. Within minutes, someone reposted it to a public platform. The title was simple: Flight Attendant Slaps Black Teen in First Class. By the time Flight 22227 was 30 minutes from landing, the video had been viewed 22,000 times. By the time it touched down, that number would triple, and by the time Zuri walked off the plane, the entire country would be talking about her. Not because she asked for it, but because sometimes injustice does not knock quietly. It crashes through the door and dares you not to flinch. Zuri Callahan didn't flinch. She never had, and she wasn't about to start now. 30 minutes before touchdown, the atmosphere on Flight 2227 was unlike any Dana McKinley had ever felt in her career. Passengers weren't talking. Not really, just whispering. Even the crying baby from row 11 had gone silent. The tension pressed against the cabin like altitude. Something invisible but heavy. Something everyone could feel, even if no one wanted to name it. Dana stood in the galley. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes stared ahead, unfocused. Carmen stood a few feet away, watching her carefully. "You need to write a statement before we land," Carmen said quietly. Dana didn't respond. Something objective, simple, no emotion, just what happened. Still no answer. "Dana, look at me." Dana turned her head slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and wet. "I hit her. Carmen, I hit a child. It doesn't matter why or how. That moment already lives on someone's phone." Carmen nodded. "Yes, it does. But if you want your voice in this, you need to write it. If you stay silent, people will speak for you. You know that." Dana reached for the emergency form tucked near the service panel. She pulled out a pen, hesitated, then started to write. The letters came slow. Her hand trembled slightly. Each sentence felt like a confession. Back in the cabin, Zuri stared down at her phone. Her father had texted 5 times. "Call me as soon as you land. Are you okay? What happened, Zuri? I need to hear from you. Please." She hadn't answered yet. She wasn't ready, not because she feared his anger, but because she knew what would happen once his voice entered this story. Everything would change. Ms. B. Underwood placed a warm hand on Zuri's arm. "Want me to sit with you when we land?" Zuri smiled faintly. "Thank you, but I think I should walk off that plane alone." B. nodded, then glanced down at Zuri's notebook. It was open to a page with one sentence written over and over in different handwriting styles. "You still get to choose who you are." The pilot came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Chicago Midway. Please return to your seats and ensure all belongings are secured. We will be on the ground shortly." Zuri reached into her tote and pulled out a pair of sunglasses. They weren't for the sun. They were for the stairs. In the cockpit. Captain Nolan Reed listened to the update from the ground. Law enforcement would be waiting at the gate. So would media. Apparently, the video had exploded in the last 20 minutes. One local outlet had already confirmed the identity of the passenger as Zuri Callahan. Another had connected her to her father. "He's not just an actor," the dispatcher said. "He's a public figure now. Civil rights, education reform, very visible." Nolan sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We'll land smoothly and deplane normally," he said. "Let them come to us. No sudden announcements. Keep the cabin calm." He paused before speaking again. "Make sure our crew has an attorney on call. This one's going to get messy." Caleb Callahan sat in the back of a black SUV outside Midway's private terminal. His hands gripped his phone. The video played again and again, though he could hardly bring himself to watch it. The slap, the silence, his daughter's stillness. She had not called yet, but he knew Zuri. She needed time. She needed control over her narrative. Even now, she was protecting her space. But Caleb could feel the walls closing in already. His publicist had called twice. His attorney was on standby. Reporters were already circling. But he wasn't thinking about the headlines. He was thinking about her cheek and about the way she stood up without raising her voice. When the flight landed, he would be waiting, but only if she wanted him to be. Flight 227 touched down with barely a bump. Applause didn't break out like it sometimes did. No cheers. Just the mechanical click of seat belts unfastening and the shuffle of passengers standing, grabbing bags, adjusting coats. Zuri stayed seated. Carmen approached her with a calm, respectful tone. "Zuri, law enforcement is waiting at the gate. They want to speak with you. If you're willing, you're not under investigation. We've made that very clear." Zuri nodded. "Okay. You don't have to say anything without an attorney, just so you know." Zuri looked up. "Will you walk with me?" Carmen paused. "Of course." Carmen motioned to the front. Dana was already standing there, hands folded, eyes low. When Zuri walked past, Dana did not speak. She did not move. Zuri walked slowly, but with purpose. The sunglasses were on. Her back was straight. Her notebook was still clutched in her hand. The moment she stepped into the jet bridge, flashes erupted. Photographers were already outside the glass panels. Officers in plain clothes waited just beyond the corner. A woman in a suit stepped forward with calm authority. Zuri Callahan. Zuri stopped and nodded. "My name is Detective Ramirez. May I speak with you for a moment?" Zuri's voice was steady. "Yes, but I'd like to call my father first." Ramirez nodded. "Absolutely. We can wait right over here." Zuri turned to Carmen. "Thank you for listening." Carmen placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave, and you were right." Zuri stepped forward, pulling out her phone. She hit dial. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered. "Zuri, Dad, are you okay?" "I'm okay now. Do you want me to come in?" "Yes." He was already walking. She hung up and faced the officer again. "I'm ready." And she was. More than she ever thought she'd be. Because some moments don't just change your day. They change your life. And Zuri Callahan was about to speak her truth, not just for herself, but for every girl who had ever been told to sit down and stay quiet. The moment Zuri stepped into the arrivals terminal, the air felt different. Not the temperature, the weight. She had stepped off flights before, dozens of them, some delayed, some smooth, some filled with small joys like a kind seatmate or a perfect cloud view, but none like this. Here, cameras were already flashing, reporters lined up like vultures, blocked off by security barriers. Microphones reached toward her as if her silence could be pulled into sound. "Zuri Callahan, do you have a statement? Were you assaulted on the flight? Is it true your father is suing the airline?" She didn't flinch. She kept walking, flanked by Detective Ramirez and Carmen. Her sunglasses shielded her eyes, but her posture said everything. "I am not small. I will not shrink." And then she saw him. Caleb Callahan stood near the far edge of the terminal, no entourage, no sunglasses, just a father with shoulders wide enough to carry a storm. He wore a black hoodie and jeans, but somehow he looked more powerful than anyone else in the room. Zuri walked toward him, the noise fading behind her. The moment they met, he wrapped his arms around her and held her tightly. Her face stayed buried in his chest for a long beat. Then she pulled back, removed her sunglasses, and looked him in the eyes. "I'm okay." His jaw flexed. "You should not have had to be." She nodded once. They stood like that for a second more before he turned to the detective. "I'm Caleb Callahan. I believe you've been speaking with my daughter." Detective Ramirez nodded. "Yes, sir. I'd like to ask her a few more questions in a private space. Standard procedure. She is not under investigation." She turned to Zuri. "We can make this as brief or as detailed as you want. You're in control here." Zuri looked to her father, then back to Ramirez. "Let's talk." Inside a quiet conference room near the private terminal, Zuri sat beside her father. Carmen stood in the corner, arms crossed but calm. "Ms. Ramirez placed a small digital recorder on the table and opened her notepad. Zuri, can you tell me in your own words what happened during the flight? Zuri took a breath. I was in seat 3A. During the drink service, the flight attendant spilled a full soda on my lap. I stayed calm. I asked if I could stand to clean myself off. She told me to sit down. I repeated that I needed to clean up, and she raised her voice. She paused. Caleb placed a steady hand on her back. At some point, another passenger made a comment. I responded, and when I turned to reach for my bag, the flight attendant stepped in front of me. I lost balance a little and brushed against her. She reacted by slapping me across the face. Silence filled the room. Ramirez nodded. Writing. And did you at any point physically threaten her? No. I never raised my hand. I never shouted. I was just trying to clean myself. Did anyone capture the moment on video? Zuri nodded. The man behind me, Brent Holloway, he recorded it. We're aware. That video is in circulation now. Caleb leaned forward. I would like to request the video be preserved in full and unedited form. Also, we will be filing a formal complaint with the airline and possibly pressing charges depending on the results of your investigation. Ramirez nodded. Understood. We're already collecting witness statements. Our team will also interview the flight attendant involved. You'll be updated within 24 hours. Zuri looked down at her notebook. Her pen hovered but didn't move. Then she spoke softly. Do you know how many times something like this happens without video? Ramirez looked at her gently. Too many. Outside, the terminal had grown louder. The video now had over 5 million views. 3 major news outlets had picked it up. A trending hashtag with Zuri's name was circulating, and even now, users were dissecting her calm response, her posture, the stillness in her body after the slap. Some called her a symbol of grace, others called her a target. A few, as always, tried to make her the problem. She's just a kid. That flight attendant was probably overwhelmed. I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. People are too sensitive these days. You can't even do your job anymore without someone filming you. Zuri hadn't read the comments yet. She didn't plan to, but she knew what they would say. She had lived inside those assumptions before. Caleb's phone buzzed. His manager, his lawyer, his sister, his foundation's director. Everyone wanted to help, but he knew better. This wasn't about statements or press conferences. It was about the moment the world decided whether or not to believe a black girl who didn't scream. And that decision was still unfolding. Back in the crew lounge, Dana McKinley sat alone. She had been removed from the flight manifest and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Her bag sat beside her, untouched. Her uniform blazer was folded neatly over the chair. She hadn't checked her phone in over an hour. She didn't need to. She knew the video was everywhere. She had watched it once. She saw herself, the way her hand moved, the look on Zuri's face, and worst of all, the faces of the other passengers. You could see the moment they no longer saw her as a professional. You could see the moment she became a warning. Carmen had texted once, "You need to speak while you still can." Dana wasn't sure she should. What if it made things worse? But then she remembered Zuri's voice. "You do not get to touch me." She opened her phone and began to type. Zuri and Caleb exited through a side door with the help of airport security. They avoided the main crowd, but cameras still followed. Back at the SUV, Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of how you handled yourself," Zuri looked out the window. "I didn't cry. You didn't need to. You spoke with clarity. That's stronger than any tear." She nodded, then reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. "What are you writing?" Her voice was quiet. "A list. Of what? Of every moment I didn't fight back, but still wasn't safe." Caleb swallowed. "And what will you do with it?" Zuri turned to him. "Turn it into something the world has to read." And he believed her. With everything in him, Zuri Callahan sat in the living room of her grandmother's bronze brick home. The house smelled of cinnamon tea and old books. Morning sun streamed through lace curtains, painting soft patterns on the hardwood floor. Yet the world outside her window was chaotic. Her phone sat on the coffee table, silent but alive with notifications. 1,000 unread messages, 1,000 headlines, 1,000 strangers weighing in on her life. She didn't touch it. Across from her, Loretta Callahan placed a teacup before her granddaughter. It rattled gently against the saucer. "Your mind looks noisy," she said. Zuri took a slow breath. "It is." Loretta nodded knowingly. "Silence isn't always empty. It can be full of what matters most, of words we have not yet spoken." Zuri wrapped her fingers around the warm china. "I don't know what to say." She did not want to be defined by the sound of a hand against flesh. She did not want to become another viral moment with a catchy hashtag, but she knew that if she remained quiet, someone else would write her story. Loretta's eyes softened. "Then tell the truth, in your own time, in your own words." Zuri looked down at the notebook in her lap. It was open to a page filled with lines she had written late last night. "I am more than this moment. I am more than a reaction. I am a voice." She closed her eyes. The living room felt like a sanctuary until her phone buzzed. 3 messages from her father, a missed call, another voicemail, a text from Carmen, from Miss Underwood, from Detective Ramirez's office. Words flew in from all sides. Offers of help, demands for a statement, requests for interviews. She felt her chest tighten. Loretta placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You have the right instinct. Silence is not weakness, it is power." Zuri heaved a sigh. "What if the world thinks I'm ignoring them?" Loretta smiled. "They will, and then they will wonder what you're planning. Curiosity is a powerful thing." Zuri considered that. She remembered how the silence on the plane had shocked the cabin, how it had spoken volumes. Maybe this was the moment to harness that, to give pause to those who rushed to judgment. She picked up the phone and unlocked it. Notifications splashed across the screen. She did not scroll. She went straight to the Notes app. With steady fingers, she began to write. At Continental Airlines headquarters, the air smelled of polished marble and stale coffee. In a conference room on the 10th floor, executives gathered around a long table. The walls were lined with digital screens showing social media feeds, trending topics, stock prices. The CFO rubbed his temples. "Our stock is down 3%. The VP of Customer Experience frowned. "Our brand reputation, it's in a dumpster fire." The head of HR cleared her throat. "We have the flight attendant on leave. We're preparing a standard apology. We'll review our policy, offer sensitivity training, send a letter to the Callahan family." The legal counsel shook his head. "That's reactive. That's going to look weak. They're not just going to settle. This has human rights undertones." The VP of Customer Experience raised a hand. "We need a statement from the father. If he calls for dialogue, That's an opportunity to pivot. The CEO, a tall woman with steel gray hair, spoke at last. Draft a message that acknowledges the incident, commits to an investigation, and opens a dialogue. But don't frame it around race. Frame it around safety and respect. The room fell silent. The legal counsel tapped his pen. Not framing it around, race will be interpreted as dismissive. The CEO sighed. Include a line that we stand against discrimination in any form, and then proceed with the rest. She looked at them all. This is our crisis moment. We can handle it with grace, or we can fuel the outrage. I want the former. Back at the Callahan brownstone, Zuri's phone buzzed again. This time it was an email notification from a national newspaper. Interview request. Your story needs to be heard in full. We want you on our front page. She closed the app. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Loretta leaned forward. We can accept, or we can keep silent until we have the words you want to share. Both are valid. Zuri set the phone aside. Not yet. Her silence had stretched into hours. It had rippled through social media. It had sparked op-eds. It had prompted policy debates. Now, people waited for her next move. Silence was no longer passive. It was electric. She stood and moved to the window. She watched a plane climb into the sky. She remembered the hiss of the engines, the brief calm after turbulence. The moment she regained her footing, she turned back to Loretta. I'm ready. In a small recording booth at the newspaper's local office, Zuri sat before a microphone. Across from her, a journalist sat with a notepad. A camera operator in the corner adjusted lights. Zuri wore a simple sweater and jeans. No sunglasses, no makeup, just herself. She pressed a hand to the table. Thank you for having me. Please, take your time, the journalist said softly. Zuri took a breath. My name is Zuri Callahan. I'm 16 years old. I was adopted 2 years after I was born. I'm a daughter, a student, a chess player, a reader. She paused. On flight 2227, I was treated like I was a problem before I spoke a word. I was spoken over and talked down to. Then I was struck, not because I did anything wrong, but because someone lost control. They lost sight of who I am. They saw a black girl. They saw a passenger. They did not see a person in need of kindness. She leaned forward. I do not want to be reduced to a viral moment. I do not want to be a statistic in someone else's headline. I want the world to know me for my voice, for my story, for my truth. She closed her eyes for a moment. I forgive the woman who struck me. But forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not excusing. It is choosing to move forward. It is choosing to speak your truth instead of remaining silent. Zuri opened her eyes. I plan to work with Continental Airlines to develop meaningful training that ensures no one is ever harmed like this again. I plan to speak with lawmakers about policies that protect unaccompanied minors. I plan to write and to read and to play chess. She smiled gently. My moment of silence ends here, and I am ready to be heard. The conference room was crisp and cool. A long table of polished wood dominated the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of Lake Michigan's calm surface. Inside, a dozen seats were arranged with nameplates and water glasses. The atmosphere felt charged, as though every breath might tip the balance. Zuri Callahan entered with her father at her side. Caleb moved with quiet purpose, his presence reassuring. Carmen Rivas matched their pace, carrying Zuri's notebook, in the corner. Ms. B. Underwood gave a subtle nod. Detective Ramirez stood at the door, ensuring no one else entered. Opposite them sat the Continental Airlines leadership. Meredith Lyons, the CEO, led the group. Beside her were the head of flight operations, a senior HR director, and a legal counsel. Captain Nolan Reed occupied a seat at the end of the table, his uniform crisp but his expression solemn. Meredith rose when Zuri approached and extended a hand. "Thank you for coming. Zuri," she said with genuine warmth, "we appreciate your willingness to meet face to face." Zuri offered a small smile and nodded. "Thank you for inviting me." Meredith gestured to the seats. "Please sit wherever you like." Zuri and her father took their places at the center of one side. Carmen and Ms. Underwood sat just behind them. On the opposite side, Meredith sat between the HR director and the legal counsel. Meredith opened a folder. "I want to begin by acknowledging the gravity of what happened. No passenger should ever be assaulted on our flights. We are deeply sorry." Zuri's gaze was steady. "Thank you." Meredith nodded and turned to the HR director. "Our proposal is this. Dana McKinley will remain on administrative leave. We will conduct a full investigation. Depending on the outcome, we will move forward with appropriate disciplinary measures. We will also fund an independent review of our unaccompanied minor procedures and passenger conflict training." Caleb leaned forward. "That's a start, but it feels reactive. My daughter was harmed physically and emotionally. She deserves more than policies. She deserves accountability and a plan to make sure this never happens again." The senior HR director spoke up. "We are open to suggestions. We want to learn." Zuri reached into her bag and pulled out her notebook. "I have some ideas." She flipped to a page titled Flight Safety and Respect Initiative. This program would include mandatory empathy training for all crew, a clear protocol for disruptive passengers, and a support line for unaccompanied minors. We can pilot it first on domestic routes, then expand globally. Meredith exchanged a glance with her legal counsel. "This proposal is impressive. It shows thought and leadership. We would be honored to partner with you on this." Zuri turned to Dana, who sat just a few seats away. Dana's hands were clasped in her lap. Her eyes were cast downward. Zuri's heart clenched. She had never wanted to humiliate her. She wanted change. Dana lifted her head and met Zuri's gaze. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but clear. "I want to apologize again." "Zuri," Dana said softly, "I lost control of my temper. I violated your trust in my duty. I take full responsibility." Zuri nodded. "I accept your apology. I know you are more than one moment." Dana exhaled a breath she seemed to be holding. "Thank you." "Zuri," Caleb spoke next, "we also expect transparency, regular updates on the investigation, a commitment to share data on incidents and resolution so passengers know you are serious about change." Meredith nodded. "That is fair. We will publish a quarterly report on our website and issue an annual summary to stakeholders." The legal counsel cleared his throat. "From a liability perspective, this is an unprecedented case. We will need indemnification clauses and careful language around admissions of liability." Caleb responded firmly but calmly. "We will negotiate those details in good faith, but our priority is justice and safety, not technicalities." Meredith placed a hand on the table. "I want to close by saying thank you to Zuri. Your bravery and clarity have made us accountable. We plan to implement these changes within 90 days. You will be part of the oversight committee." Zuri took a deep breath. "I appreciate that. I want to ensure this is more than a gesture. I want real change." Captain Nolan Reed stood. "As a pilot, safety is my top priority. I commit to sharing flight deck perspective in your training modules. We will work together to humanize protocols." He offered a respectful nod to Zuri. Zuri smiled. "Thank you, Captain." Ms. Underwood rose next. She had not spoken yet. She stepped around to the head of the table and addressed both sides. "I have spent my life teaching young people to find their voice. What I have seen here today gives me hope that you will honor her voice and keep it at the center of your reforms." She returned to her seat. The room felt lighter. Meredith closed the folder. "Then we are agreed. Let us draft a memorandum of understanding outlining these steps. We will sign it today and begin implementation immediately." Caleb extended his hand. "I look forward to working with you." He shook Meredith's hand firmly. Zuri shook hands with each executive in turn, including Dana. When it was over, they all stood. Carmen gave Zuri a proud smile. Dana's eyes met Zuri's one last time, full of remorse and gratitude. Zuri offered a small nod. Outside the conference room, cameras waited. Flashbulbs went off as they emerged. No one rushed to pose. They walked as a unit, a sign of unity and progress. On the steps of the building, journalists called out questions. Will the flight attendant be fired or rehabilitated? How soon can passengers expect the new safety training? Does this set a precedent for large carriers? What will your daughter do next? Mr. Callahan. Caleb raised his hand for silence. We will hold a press conference next week once details are finalized. Right now, our focus is on action, not words. He turned to Zuri. Are you okay? Zuri nodded. I am. She looked out at the crowd. She felt steady. She had been silent for long enough. Now she had a seat at the table. And that was just the beginning. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the training center auditorium. Rows of empty chairs faced a podium draped in the airline's logo. Today, Dana McKinley returned not as crew, but as a student. She stood in the back, her uniform exchanged for business casual. Her chest tightened, but her posture was steady. She had faced much darker rooms in her career, but none so personal. Zuri Callahan stood at the front beside the CEO, Meredith Lyons. The teenager wore a crisp blazer over a simple blouse. She looked every bit the young leader she had become, papers in her hand. She took a breath and began. Thank you all for joining us today. There is no greater responsibility than ensuring every passenger feels safe and respected. We have listened, we have learned, and now we begin to act. Dana watched Zuri and felt a surge of pride and humility. This teen had taught her more about dignity than any training session ever could. Behind Dana stood Carmen Rivas, clutching her tablet, her eyes bright with encouragement. Caleb Callahan sat in the front row. His quiet support had made all the difference. Ms. B. Underwood sat beside him, notebook and pen at the ready. Detective Ramirez had helped craft the guidelines. Even Brent Holloway was present, barred only by a reminder that no recording was permitted. Zuri continued. Our first module will focus on empathy in conflict, exploring how stress and fatigue can erode compassion. Flight attendants will share experiences and learn de-escalation strategies. We will partner with psychologists, social scientists, and community advocates to build real skills. The room filled gradually with staff members, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and resolve. Among them, Dana recognized colleagues she had served with for years. Some offered nods of respect, others avoided eye contact. She did not mind. She was here to learn. After Zuri spoke, Meredith took the podium. As CEO, I commit to allocating the necessary resources. We will track feedback, measure results, and adjust our programs continuously. This is not a one-time fix. This is a cultural shift. Dana's mind reeled. A cultural shift. She had spent decades trying to hold up a professional facade. Now she was part of something real, something lasting. The session moved into group discussions. Dana joined a small circle of 4, a young attendant who recently scored the promotion Dana once coveted, a ground staff representative, a safety officer. And Dana, the facilitator asked, "Tell us about a time when you felt unseen as a crew member." Dana closed her eyes briefly. The stories came easy. Late-night flights with drunk passengers, a supervisor ignoring her plea for help, a passenger filming her instead of offering comfort when she was injured in turbulence. Her voice was quiet but steady. It was not her proudest moment. She said, but in the silence that followed, I learned I had the power to change the narrative. The others leaned in. A few tears welled, a shared sense that vulnerability was a strength, not a flaw. Meanwhile, Zuri paced backstage. She read over her notes for the press conference that afternoon. Her voice would be calm. Her message would be clear: hold the airline accountable. Demand continued progress. Emphasized that forgiveness did not mean forgetting. She felt the familiar flutter of nerves. Then she remembered the slap, the ache in her cheek, the sting of being underestimated, and she smiled. She would never forget, but she would never be defined by it either. At the press conference, Meredith Lyons began by introducing Dana McKinley. After months of investigation and reflection, "We have reached a resolution," she said. "Ms. McKinley will undergo an intensive conflict resolution and empathy training program. She will join us as a facilitator, sharing her experiences to help colleagues grow. We believe that accountability paired with opportunity for growth serves justice more than dismissal alone." Dana felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded, then took the microphone. "I accepted full responsibility when I struck Zuri. I regret my actions deeply. I have spent this time learning why I reacted as I did. I understand now how my stress and assumptions clouded my judgment. I vow to use my mistakes as a tool to help prevent others from suffering the way I caused." She paused. She looked directly at Zuri, seated to her left. "I hope you will allow me the chance to make amends through my work. I will never forget this moment, but I will not let it be my worst moment." Applause filled the hall, not thunderous, but sincere. Then Zuri stepped forward with the mic. "Thank you. Today we witness the power of true accountability, not as punishment, but as a path to transformation. I believe in the airline's commitment and in every person here. Together, we can build an environment where respect and safety go hand in hand. This is not just an airline policy. This is a promise we make to each other every day we fly." Her voice carried conviction. She finished and returned to her seat. The room rose in a standing ovation. Later, Dana and Zuri met in a quiet hallway. Dana offered a tentative smile. "Thank you for letting me stay." Zuri placed a hand gently on her arm. "Thank you for being brave enough to learn." They embraced briefly. Two people changed forever by one difficult moment. 1 week later, Zuri led a session with a small group of lawmakers. She spoke about the need for federal guidelines on in-flight conduct and unaccompanied minor protections. Her policy proposals were sharp and practical. She imagined herself on a stage one day, speaking to an even bigger audience. She had found her voice, and she would use it. Back at school, her friends gathered around, full of curiosity and support. She shared highlights about the training center and her goals. They listened, proud. Her life had taken a turn she never asked for. But out of it, she had emerged stronger, more certain of who she was. In Chicago's South Side, Loretta Callahan tended her garden. She watched Zuri's updates on her tablet. She smiled, remembering how the sky once felt like the safest place. Now, Zuri knew the earth could hold her too. For Dana, the weeks passed in a blur of seminars, workshops, and reflective journaling. She attended therapy sessions, studied bias awareness, and co-led panels on customer empathy. Each day she confronted her old habits and rewrote them. Her manager later offered her a new position as a training coordinator. She accepted. It felt like coming home. On her first flight back to New York as a coordinator, she moved down the aisle not as a humble attendant, but as a mentor. She greeted each colleague with genuine warmth. She praised their efforts. She shared quick reminders of the new protocols, row after row. The cabin felt lighter. At seat 15C, she saw Zuri reading a policy draft by the window. Zuri looked up, and they exchanged a smile. No words needed. The plane lifted, carrying them both into new horizons. Neither would ever be the same. Not defined by a single slap, not defeated by a moment of weakness, but stronger for having faced the fallout and chosen to grow, and that was how they flew forward, together. The flight deck announcement came just as the plane leveled off. Welcome aboard Continental Flight 555 from Chicago to New York. We are cruising at 37,000 feet. Please sit back and relax. Coffee and beverage service will begin shortly. Thank you for flying with us today. Dana McKinley stood in the galley, her new blue cardigan and crisp white blouse replacing her old uniform. Her badge read Training Coordinator. She paused for a moment, smoothing the gentle wrinkles in her blouse, and took a steadying breath. Today felt different. She moved the beverage cart forward, a practiced smile on her face. Row 15. Diet Coke, no ice. Dana's heart did a familiar flip. She approached the seat, and as she poured the soda into a cup, she saw a familiar face look up from a college brochure. Zuri Callahan. A soft smile lit Zuri's features. "Hi, Dana," she said, her voice gentle. "Thank you for this." Dana placed the cup on the tray table. "You got it. Zuri." "I remember." Zuri nodded and sipped. The ice cubes tinkled against the plastic rim. It was a small moment, but it felt like a victory. They had both flown through a storm. Now they were here, lighter for it. Dana straightened the cart and moved on. She felt the gentle warmth bloom in her chest at having served Zuri again. This time, not as a troubled passenger, but as someone who helped. A year had passed since Flight 2227's turbulence became a national conversation. In that time, Continental Airlines had rolled out its Flight Safety and Respect initiative. Every crew member had undergone empathy and de-escalation training. Protocols for handling unaccompanied minors had been revamped. Disruptive passengers now faced immediate review, and support lines existed for crew in crisis. Dana had co-led hundreds of workshops. She had spoken at conferences about accountability and growth. She had learned to forgive herself and embrace her role as a mentor. Her new position allowed her to shape the culture she once feared. Zuri had graduated high school with honors. She had launched a student group focused on restorative justice. She had addressed legislators about in-flight safety laws for minors. Colleges vied for her business, political science, and public policy programs. She had found her voice and honed it into an instrument of change. In coach, passengers chatted softly. A mother calmed her toddlers. A businessman tapped on his laptop. A tourist gazed out the window as farmland passed below. Dana moved the cart with ease. Each stop brought her small moments of connection. A smile, a thank you, a shared joke about turbulence. It filled her with quiet joy to see people relaxed again. At 8A, she handed a cup of coffee to an elderly passenger who reminded her of Ms. B. Underwood. They exchanged pleasantries about books. Dana noted the genuine warmth in that simple conversation. Back in the galley, she checked her watch. 30 minutes left. She secured the cart, spoke to the flight deck about the upcoming descent. Everything felt right. Zuri closed her brochure and stood in the aisle. She waited until the cart passed, then moved forward with calm confidence. Dana spotted her and offered a nod of recognition. Zuri returned the nod and stepped into the galley. "May I say something?" Zuri asked quietly. "Of course," Dana replied. Zuri held out a small manila envelope. "I wanted you to have this. It's my college application essays. You inspired some of these pieces. I thought you might like to read them." Dana's eyes widened. She took the envelope with careful fingers. "Thank you. Zuri, that means so much." Zuri smiled shyly. "You're part of my story now. A good part." Dana felt tears prick her eyes. She pressed the envelope to her heart. "Thank you, Zuri." Truly. They shared a brief embrace. In the flight deck, Captain Nolan Reed and his co-pilot prepared for descent. Nolan glanced at the cockpit video monitor, which had been part of the airline's new empathy program. He smiled when he saw Zuri's name on the passenger list and Dana's badge on the service report. They had turned a tragedy into transformation. "We did some good here," he said softly to his co-pilot. They began their approach. The runway at LaGuardia appeared below, its lights stretching like a pathway home. On deck, the plane touched down smoothly. Applause quietly burst through the cabin. Passengers unbuckled, gathered belongings. The tension that once lingered on flights seemed gone. Dana watched as people exited. She lingered near the galley, eyes bright. Zuri and her father waited near the door. Caleb smiled when he saw Dana. "Thank you for everything," he said to her. "It was my honor," Dana replied. Zuri approached with the same gentle smile. "Good flight?" Dana asked her. "The best," Zuri said. "I felt safe the entire time." "That's what matters most," Dana said softly. They all moved off the jet bridge together. The terminal lights glowed warmly. Reporters and cameras no longer called out their names. Today, it was just a regular arrival. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, leaves fell in slow spirals. The city skyline was a distant glow. Caleb put an arm around Zuri. "Ready to grab a bite?" he asked. Zuri nodded, and Dana smiled. "I think I'll catch the next flight out. But I'll see you at the next training session." They hugged again, then parted. Dana walked down the taxiway toward her crew shuttle. She looked back once at the plane that had carried them all through so much. She touched her uniform badge, the one that now read Training Coordinator. She whispered to the sky, Thank you. The shuttle door closed. As it pulled away, she saw Zuri and Caleb head toward the terminal exit. Dana felt a lightness she hadn't known she could feel again. She opened her window slightly and breathed in the evening air. The sky was clear, the horizon stretched wide. The world was moving, always moving, but for once it felt steady. She closed her eyes and smiled. Thank you for joining us in this powerful story of human fragility and resilience. We witnessed a moment of injustice that sparked a movement toward understanding and respect. We watched a young woman reclaim her voice and an experienced professional transform her pain into purpose. Above all, we saw that discrimination can be challenged when courage meets compassion. If this journey moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our next videos. Together we can shine a light on the stories that matter, uplift one another, and stand united against prejudice. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions and never stop believing in the power of redemption.